patch 3.27 has dropped, and with it, a bunch of new Foulborn Uniques have been unleashed, over 80 in fact. That's way more than I expected, and there's some really good ones in there too. So I'm going to be covering some more of the tech you can use with those items in your builds, and let's get straight into it, beginning with the Foulborn version of Lightning Coil, which replaces the life modifier for a modifier that makes 50% of chaos damage be taken as lightning damage. Notably, this is all chaos damage, not just hits. So this will work for incoming damage from poison and things like ground effects that deal chaos damage over time as well. Now there's a couple of reasons why this is a great modifier switch up. The first is the fact that this new modifier replaces the life modifier on the original Lightning Coil. That means that there's no life modifier present on the Foulborn version of this unique, so you can make full use of the life mastery for 15% increased life when your body armor has no life modifiers. And that's great considering the life modifier on the original Lightning Coil wasn't particularly good anyway, capping out at just 80 life. And that's a lot lower than the amount of life you can get on crafted armors these days. So that one is pretty much pure upside. Obviously, you must spend a passive point to obtain that mastery, but you will be getting a decent chunk of extra life for doing so. Now, the other massive benefit to this Foulborn body armor is of course taking chaos damage as another damage type. This modifier is extremely rare. The only other example is the Uber Flesh and Flame dual combo for the Templar's hidden ascendancy notable, Searing Purity, which makes 45% of chaos damage be taken as lightning, and another 45% be taken as fire. Now I wouldn't recommend combining these two because damage taken as is not normalized to 100% light conversion, so by combining these you'd essentially be taking 40% extra damage compared to the original chaos damage instance. However, that's an Uber Flesh and Flame dual combo that has massive opportunity cost to obtain and utilize, but the Foulborn Lightning Coil is a version of a unique that's already very good, and the Foulborn version is essentially just an upgrade for most setups. So if a build was already in line to make use of this armor, then making use of the Foulborn version is likely a better option, especially if you're not planning to cap out your chaos resistance. And that's because by taking half of the incoming chaos damage as lightning, your effective chaos resistance ends up being half of the difference between your chaos resistance and your lightning resistance. So for example, at minus 60% chaos resistance and 75% lightning resistance, by using Foulborn Lightning Coil, your effective chaos resistance will be 7.5%. So you'd go from taking 60% more chaos damage than the original instance of damage to taking 7.5% less without investing into any chaos resistance at all. That's kind of ridiculous. And this is because whilst half of the damage is still being taken at that 60% more rate because of the negative 60% chaos resistance, the other half is being mitigated by 75% thanks to that shiny new Foulborn modifier. And the effective chaos resistance when combining the result of each half of damage is the same as having 7.5% chaos resistance. But these days, most characters are not running around with minus 60% chaos resistance. Usually you're at least at 0% or into the positives. So let's take an example of having 20% chaos resistance and 75% lightning resistance. Well, at that point, your effective chaos resistance would be 47.5%. So as you can see, the lower chaos resistance you have and the higher lightning resistance you have with this modifier, the more benefit you'll gain from it overall. But just having a relatively small investment into chaos resistance will mean you can have a good amount of effective chaos resistance. Now there's another upside to this modifier, and this can be quite a big upside depending on the content you're running, and that's chaos penetration. One area of the game where you're going to encounter unavoidable chaos penetration is during a simulacrum encounter, where wave modifiers may contain extra monster modifiers for fizz as extra chaos and chaos penetration on top. If you take damage as a different type, then damage type specific penetration cannot apply to that portion of damage. So with regards to these types of modifiers here, monster damage penetrates 10% of chaos resistance. Well, for the half of the damage that's taken as lightning instead, that portion of damage is not affected by this penetration modifier. So overall, this new Foulborn version of Lightning Coil is almost exclusively an upgrade to the original version. However, there's one thing you can do with this item, and this was already possible with the original version of Lightning Coil, but it's made better by the Foulborn variant due to the penetration upside that I just discussed. And that is that it's possible to have 100% of physical hit damage taken as either lightning or chaos damage, and take all fire and cold damage as either lightning or chaos damage. So the end result is that you purely scale lightning and chaos resistance to mitigate all incoming damage types. This is an extremely high gear investment setup, and it's very hard to make a good build out of it due to the equipment restrictions, so you have been warned. But to do that, you need to use the following. A Foulborn Lightning Coil for 50% of physical hit damage taken as lightning damage, and 50% of chaos damage taken as lightning damage. A Purity of Lightning Watcher's Eye and Sublime Vision for a total 50% of fire and cold damage taken as lightning damage while affected by Purity of Lightning. A Glorious Vanity Timeless Jewel in the name of Zibaqua for Divine Flesh for 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage. A Bound by Destiny Jewel for 10% of physical damage taken as lightning damage while equipped with 4 Crusader items. A Crusader Helmet with an elevated modifier for 13% of physical hit damage taken as lightning damage. And lastly, and I've saved the best till last of course, a Tempering Orb Enchanted Darkscorn for 8% increased modifier magnitudes of chaos or physical modifiers for 27% of physical hit damage taken as chaos damage. And compiling all of that together, you'll have 73% of physical hit damage taken as lightning, and 27% taken as chaos, for a total 100% of physical hit damage taken as. And you'll have 50% of fire and cold damage taken as lightning, and 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos, for a total 100% of fire and cold damage taken as. And note the 50% of lightning damage taken as chaos on Divine Flesh, and the 50% chaos damage taken as lightning on the Foulborn Lightning Coil. This means that no matter what damage type you're taking, you're always able to avoid damage type specific penetration on at least half of the damage. More in the case of fire and cold, where you're able to completely ignore penetration for those damage types. Now, I will mention that there's actually a Foulborn version of Darkscorn too, which allows you to gain Unholy Might on critical strike, which is nice. But as I said, as fun as this setup is for existing, it's incredibly hard to make a workable build around all of the restrictions that it imposes. Okay, let's move on to a crazy Foulborn unique, Emperor's Vigilance, which has the spell block modifier replaced by plus 20% to maximum quality. Now this shield is already one of the best options for offhand attack skills due to the existence of Seething Fury, a unique jewel that grants added offhand base crit and added offhand crit multi based on the maximum energy shield on your equipped shield. And whilst you can get a crafted shield with a lot of maximum energy shield, the issue with offhand attack skills is that a lot of them scale their flat damage directly from the armor or evasion on the equipped shield. So if you max out on a crafted armor or evasion shield, you cannot also scale crit using Seething Fury. But Emperor's Vigilance allows you to do both, and this Foulborn version is just even better at doing that, because quality is a multiplier on the already large amount of armor and energy shield on this item. So here's one I pulled up from the trade site, and this one is almost maxed out on the Sacred Defense roll, and it just has 2,556 armor and 539 energy shield. That is wild. Using Seething Fury with this shield, you'd be gaining 7.95% added base crit, that's on top of the existing 5% base crit on all offhand attack skills, for a total 12.95% base crit. That's going to be really easy to scale up to crit cap. And you'll also gain 212% crit multi for those offhand attacks. That is insane. And on top of that, you also have the Shield Mastery for a further 1% crit multi per 10 energy shield on the equipped shield. So you'd gain a total 265% critical strike multiplier for offhand attacks with this combo. That's going to be some damage. Now speaking of damage, how about this Foulborn version of Rebuke of the Vaal? Now, this sword has been used a bit in more recent patches for Eviscerate Ignite on Elementalist, and it sees some occasional use for Battle Mage setups, but the Foulborn version replaces the attack speed with a very large trap throw speed modifier. 20 to 40% increased trap throwing speed. That is a lot. To put that into perspective, the small nodes on the tree provide 4 or 5% of this stat, while this notable up here grants 12%. But there's only a combined total of 29% increased trap throwing speed available on the passive tree. And even the Saboteur only has 3 instances of 5% increases to this stat. Now, traps have a much slower base throwing speed compared to mines. It's actually double that of mines, in fact, with a base throw speed of 0.6 seconds. So getting up to 40% on a single item is going to be extremely impactful, not to mention the fact that this sword also has a ton of flat damage on it. But how can you make use of this sword? Well, there's actually only 3 skills that are traps that can use one-handed swords. Blade Trap, and the 2 new Trarthus gems, Spectral Helix of Trarthus and Spectral Throw of Trarthus. And I want to make note of Spectral Helix of Trarthus here in particular, because this skill essentially just performs a Spectral Helix attack as if you made the attack yourself, only it comes from a trap and it has a bit more damage effectiveness. But the skill has one very important line: throw up to 1 additional trap if dual wielding. Now that means you could potentially dual wield 2 Foulborn Rebuke of the Vaal swords and gain up to 80% increased trap throwing speed and throw at least 2 traps every single usage. I'm just saying, that's going to be a lot of damage. Okay, let's look at another Foulborn sword, the Razor of the 7th Sun, which has the 100% increased melee physical damage against ignited enemies, replaced by a modifier that grants ignites inflicted with this weapon deal 100% more damage. Now, some of you may remember that Garatha was playing an Eviscerate Ignite Elementalist a few leagues back, and that build was using Story of the Vaal, because the conversion doesn't matter on Elementalist, as you're able to ignite with all of your damage, and the weapon has up to 75% more damage with Ignite. But this Foulborn version of the Razor of the 7th Sun is just a pure upgrade to that weapon for Eviscerate Ignite. It has more base damage, it has a 100% more Ignite damage multiplier with no roll range, and on top of that, it also has 100% increased burning damage if you've ignited an enemy recently, so that's just even more scaling for Ignite. And there's even some extra life recovery there too. And this is just going to be a great weapon for Eviscerate Ignite Elementalist. You can use all of the normal methods to obtain extra flat damage, such as Smite or Vaal Smite. And an extra bonus on top, you can make use of Tempering Orbs on this Foulborn Razor of the 7th Sun to scale the magnitude of fire damage modifiers. And this will tag both the more Ignite and the increased burning modifiers. So with 8% modifier magnitude, you'd have 108% more damage with Ignites and 108% increased burning damage. This is just a great weapon overall for that particular use case. Now lastly, for this video, I have to mention the Foulborn Mageblood. They actually did it. They did the meme. Foulborn Mageblood activates your rightmost flasks. You just love to see it. Now I'll be covering many more of these new Foulborn items in the coming days, so stick around for that. But thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.